All right, welcome everybody. We are here for Service Mesh Academy. I'm Flynn from Buoyant. I'm here with Ben from Spotify. Ben gets to do most of the heavy lifting here, which is a lovely, lovely thing from my point of view. Today we're going to be talking about internal developer platforms and Linkerd and Backstage and all sorts of cool things like that. Ben, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, sure. My name is Ben. I am a senior engineer at Spotify. I've been at Spotify for nearly 6 years, I think now, working
Nice.
on Backstage open source for most of that. Yeah, maintainer of Backstage as well, the CNCF project.
Which is why we dragged Ben on for this, because we're going to be talking about Backstage, and having one of the maintainers talk about it seemed like a lovely thing to do. Yeah, so let's go ahead and get started with that. So I think I rather like that one instead. Yeah, I'm Ben Lambert, Spotify maintainer of Backstage.io. I'm Flynn. I'm a tech evangelist for Linkerd. I'm mostly just acting as the MC for this one, which is kind of fun. One thing I want to get started with is please, oh God, please scan the QR code and give us some feedback. We would love to hear from everybody watching what we can do to make this better or what we shouldn't do to avoid making it worse. I will see if I can't get the URL itself to paste into the commentary as well, because that might help. The agenda for today, we're going to talk quickly about some of the problems. We're going to talk a little bit about service meshes and how internal developer platforms help with the problems we're going to talk about. We're going to do a very, very quick demo or a quick discussion of Linkerd and Backstage. Then we're going to go into a demo. Most of this is going to be the demo where you get to watch me just a little bit, but mostly Ben showing you how to actually get things done with Backstage.
Stumbling through.
Say again?
Stumbling through. It's going to be fine. It's going to be good.
Yeah, it'll be fun. We'll all pray to the demo gods, and hopefully it'll go smoothly. If you want to follow along with what we are doing, you will need a cluster. We have done this with K3D clusters and with a Acebo cluster, which is what we're actually going to be using for the demo. Pretty much anything should work. I don't think there's anything terribly specific about the clusters that we're using here. That being said, we do a couple of points. We will be relying on load balancer services. If you want to use something like Minikube, then you can presumably work around that. You will need the npm command installed because some of the stuff we're doing with Backstage will rely on that. Really, that's the npx command line utility, but that ships with npm these days, so that's the easy way to get it. You'll need kube control, you'll need the Linkerd CLI, and you'll need Docker to build a Backstage image. So off we go. With that, let's talk a little bit about the problems that led to this whole internal developer platform thing. If you want to get things done with microservices, there are a lot of things that you have to know about them. You have to know which microservices are running, which sounds simple, but if you're in a large organization, it might not be. You have to know what code they're running, or at least what their API is like. You have to know what each of these microservices can do. You have to know how to use it. You have to be able to trust that the one you're talking to is really the right thing. You have to be able to tell when one of them is misbehaving. You have to know who to talk to if one of them is misbehaving so you can get it fixed. This is a lot of stuff. In small organizations, and I should really be saying in organizations with a small number of microservices, relatively speaking, then, again, this is not all that difficult. The application that we're going to be looking at a little bit today has 4 microservices, and keeping track of 4 is not all that hard. On the other hand, hey, Ben, how many microservices do you use at Spotify?
Too many to count, I would say.
Hundreds? Thousands? Yeah, in that sort of environment, your life is going to be much more challenging. Even knowing that a given service exists is very hard. We've also, one of my favorite stories from back at a previous job was one where we found that a particular organization was running so many microservices that when they came out with a new version, they just left all the old ones running because it was too hard to try to go back and figure out who all was using the one that they had just upgraded to be able to upgrade all the clients to be able to get rid of the old version. So they had, who even knows how many old dead microservices still running. That was kind of disturbing. Service meshes can help you trust things, and they can provide you with a lot of information about what's going on in your cluster. Internal developer platforms, on the other hand, let you know a lot about what's going on and keeping track of all the information that we were just talking about. Service mesh in microservices applications, everything that's going on involves communicating over the network. The network is fundamentally insecure. It's fundamentally unreliable. We can add a service mesh to the mix to add security, reliability, and observability to your application at the platform level uniformly across the entire application without needing to change any of your application. Why no? I haven't said that a lot. Why would you think such a thing? So yeah, fundamentally, the service mesh is about the trust part. And the observability definitely helps. The reliability definitely helps. But really, the trust part is, I think, kind of the most important there. Beyond that, we get into the internal developer platform, which I shall let Ben talk about.
Yes. So I guess the bigger question is, what is an IDP? I mean, there's a few definitions, right? There's an internal developer portal, an internal developer platform. I think they're kind of interchangeable, to be honest. But they are basically a single pane of glass, right, for your engineers at your company. And what do I mean by that? I mean, it's a one-stop shop, right, for all your engineers to go to. It's the Google of your company. Like, you go to it, you find everything you need to know about your running services, your logs, stuff like that. Maybe it's links to other services too. It might not just all be in Backstage or IDP. Sorry, I'm a little bit biased here. I'm going to say Backstage a lot, and I might mean IDP.
It's okay. I say Linkerd a lot when I should be saying service mesh.
Yeah. And yeah, it's customized to your organization's needs, right? Like I said, I think I was thinking about this a little bit earlier today, and it's like, I don't think, I've had quite a lot of jobs over the years, and I don't think I've ever done the same thing, same tech stack in every company, right? So they need to be very kind of customized to an organization and what sort of tech stack they have. I was talking about cataloging services a little bit just then, like trying to find everything that you own, like being able to, have a one place where all of the microservices software, everything inside your organization is. So you can explore it, you can go find it, you can go search it. You can see, see the stuff that you own too. And increasing developer productivity, so making it easier for your engineers to work, or engineers around you to work. Kind of making, we're going to talk a little bit about scaffolding and stuff like that in the next slide, but and self-service in the next slide, but more like, patterns for your patterns and metrics that engineers need to see and things like that, just surfacing them into one place and making this all visible for every engineer or whichever person is looking at Backstage. Yeah. And the self-service part, I was talking about a little bit about this. IDPs, especially one thing that we got in Backstage, is kind of removing a lot of complexity from day-to-day operations for an engineer. So you imagine, like I said, working at different companies, different tech stacks, different services for logging, monitoring. All this stuff is kind of like boilerplate setup for engineers, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, when I want to create a new service for, create a new service inside an organization, it's like, okay, I spend like 3 days setting up like how to deploy this thing into Kubernetes and then log in and all this stuff. That we can automate that, right? So self-service is a big part of IDP, and being able to abstract away kind of all the boilerplate stuff and things that you have to do quite repetitively when you create new services. Let's encapsulate that all into like a form, for instance, where people can just type in, okay, my software service is going to be called Blob. I want to deploy it into this repo. It's going to go and create you a new component. It's going to be all with your engineers or organization's best practices built in, and kind of get that from like minute one instead of day 4. Right, we've got all that, and it creates a repository for you. It can deploy it. It's got all your build system set up, everything like that, kind of just done out of the box, which is great.
Yeah. So, taking a quick look under the hood at how Linkerd actually works. Honestly, this is how service meshes in general work most of the time. Like I said, it's an infrastructure component. We offer security, reliability, observability at the platform level. Every service mesh does this by taking over communications between the workloads. Linkerd takes over the communications by sticking a little proxy next to each of your application pods and then routing all the network communications through that proxy, which means that that proxy can then go and mediate and measure all of the communications. So we add security via MTLS. We can add reliability with things like retries and timeouts and all that. We can add observability by keeping track of your success rate and your traffic rate and latency and all this kind of stuff. We can also go and tap requests, so we can show you request headers in detail. There's a lot of stuff that we get to do by virtue of taking over communications in the cluster. Like I said, all the meshes have that take over communications functionality. They don't all do it with these little sidecar proxies, though. Backstage.
Yes. So Backstage is a open source framework for building your own IDP. It's kind of another thing too, which I'll get onto a little bit, which is...
That word framework seems important.
Yeah, the CNCF project is a framework, but we at Spotify have had Backstage for a lot longer than the open source project. So I guess it's kind of two things. It's the framework to help you build open source, to help you build IDPs, but it's also what we call our own internal IDP at Spotify, which we've been using for, it's had different names over the years, but we've had something like this for, 10 years, I would say. We are an incubating CNCF project. Like I said, it originally built at Spotify. We kind of looked at Backstage for a hack week and was like, okay, maybe we can open source with this and see what it would take. And then this is where the Backstage framework came from. It's kind of, it's made up of multiple things. We're going to get onto this in the workshop a little bit, but you've got the core, which is like the Backstage core, I guess. We've got plugins which sit on top of that, and then you've got your app, which is a combination of plugins. These numbers need a little bit of updating, actually, because there's probably a lot more than 100 open source plugins and modules now inside the ecosystem. But we've got plugins for like the software catalog, which we're going to get onto. Scaffolder templates, we're not really going to touch too much today. Tech docs, Kubernetes, things like this, plugins for Backstage that help you integrate with services, third-party services, or whatever you've got running inside your organization.
I think it's definitely more than 100 now.
I think it's definitely more than 100 now.
Okay, so that brings us up to the demo. Let me point out a couple of things before we flip over to do that. Number one, I should point out that if you're trying to follow along, this is the workshop repo. So if you clone github.com binjd lambert backstage linkerd workshop, then you will get to the stuff that Ben will be playing with.
Yes.
And the other thing that I think is important, I'll come back to that URL in just a moment. The other thing that I think is particularly important is if you have questions, the best way to do it is to join the workshops channel on the Linkerd community Slack at slack.linkerd.io. There is a chat feature that we can see from Restream, but Slack is much, much easier to keep track of for this. So I would strongly encourage you to go there. If you have questions on the Slack, I will be able to see them, and then we'll be able to get them answered, hopefully.
Yes.
All right. Let me come back to this, and I think the first thing that we're going to do here is we are going to see what's in our cluster to start off with. And the answer is nothing. This is a brand new cluster. We created it pretty much right before this workshop. This is a SIVO cluster solely so that Ben and I can both have access to it, despite the fact that we are in quite different locations with a large ocean separating us. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to get Linkerd installed in this cluster, which I shall do. I'm going to do this with our usual command line way, just because I don't really need anything special. So I first installed the CRDs. Now I'm going to install Linkerd itself. It's remarkable how doing this in a demo, all of these commands take just long enough to be very, very concerned about whether or not they're working. So that's Linkerd installed, and I'm going to finish up by installing Linkerd Viz. And the first thing that Viz is going to do is it is going to wait for the rest of the Linkerd control plane to start running. This is another one where it's going to take just long enough for me to get really nervous that it's not working, and then it'll finish. So in the meantime, if those of you who are watching have any questions, now's a great time for them. Or if, Ben, you've thought about something that you meant to mention and did not, it's a good time for it.
So the workshop repo that's linked here, so it's kind of bare at the minute. It's got a README of like what we're going to go through, but that link will stay around for the foreseeable future. So if you
Right.
this is recorded and streamed, if you want to watch it on a recording or whatever, you can still go ahead and use it. I will push everything that we're about to build here today to the same repo, so you will be able to see it as well, what we're going to do. But I thought it'd be good to start from scratch. We have a demo script in there. If we get stuck, we're hopefully not going to get stuck. It's going to be fine. But yeah, I'll push everything there, and you can play to your heart's content or whatever.
Hopefully, we won't get stuck.
Fine.
Thank you, P. Verbist, for posting the GitHub link for the workshop in the Slack channel. I appreciate that. So while we were talking, I ran Linkerd check. This is just going through and making sure that everything about our Linkerd installation, including Viz, is happy. It is happy. That's great. And with that, oh yes, I'm not quite done. I also need to install our Faces demo application. So I'm actually doing 3 commands at once here. The first one is I'm creating the Faces namespace. Then I'm going to annotate the Faces namespace so that Linkerd will pick up Faces and put it into the mesh. And then I'm actually running the helm install command to install Faces. One of the things that I'm doing here is I'm explicitly telling Faces that we're not going to use an Ingress controller, and I want it to just go ahead and create a load balancer service. In the technical world, we call that cheating, because what I'm actually doing here is just skipping the step where we install an Ingress controller and using the poor man's Ingress controller functionality built into Faces. And I'm doing that solely to reduce the amount of things that we need to install during this workshop. Honestly, I might, when we get all the scripts posted up here, I might very well not do things that way. So if I then take a look at services in my Faces repo, you know what? I think I'm going to make this window a little bit larger as well. This is how you know we're doing this live, as I've said before. All right, that looks a bit better, or at least a bit easier to read. So you see that one of these has an external IP address, and if I go to that external IP address, then you can see that, oh, look, our application is running. Isn't that nice? And with that, I think we shall take it over to Ben. And Ben, you've already got your stuff shared as you like, right?
I'm hoping so. This is going to be fun to try and switch. This is also my first time using OBS, so I apologize in advance if it's a little bit awkward and clunky, but I'm going to give it a go. So
I think
what
that,
I have, go ahead.
I think you could probably make that text larger.
A little larger. So let's go this way. Is this better? Is this good?
I think so.
It is huge on my screen at the minute, so this is going to be fun. So
I believe it.
What we have here is just the clone of the repo. Starting from scratch, we are going to create a Backstage app. And we can do that by running hold on one second, mpx app backstage/create app. And we will do at the latest as well and grab the latest one. We can see that in the terminal at the bottom. I can try and make this a little bit bigger.
Yeah, I think a little bit more than that even would be good. Yeah, there we go.
All right.
Sorry for making your eyes bleed on your end, Ben.
It looks like my monitor right now looks like, you know, when you used to plug in external displays and you get the wrong resolution, 32 pixels. Like this is, yeah, it's quite big.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm just going to type any name here. What this is going to do is just create a folder inside this checked out repo that we've got. So you can see.
And this is kind of showing off, I think, what you meant by Backstage being a framework for building things. When I first started messing with Backstage in preparation for doing, this is actually, I think, like the second time we've done this talk. We did it once at Cloud Native Live. Yeah. When I first started messing with Backstage, I was expecting that I was just going to go and do a Helm install or something like that. Ben's like, no, you're going to go through and build your very own, tailored to your environment. And it was a bit surprising, honestly, but it's pretty cool. Yeah.
There's a little bit of configuration. I mean, okay, there's quite a lot of configuration that goes into kind of setting up your own Backstage and app, right? We're kind of moving to a little bit more of a plug and play model, especially when it comes to like configuring kind of the front end and the back end. We're kind of there with the back end, but the front end needs a little bit of work, which is what we're kind of working on right now, is to make that a little bit more simpler. You're going to run into this. I can show you what it might look like in the future, for instance, but you're going to see the way that it is today, at least for today. This is going to take a second to install, so I'm going to just carry on talking a little bit. But what we can see here on the left is what it's created, and this is they called it, it's technically like a monorepo. So it's a repository which is going to contain packages for both the front end and the back end for Backstage, because this plugin architecture that I spoke about earlier allows you to build front-end plugins, which can be, you know, like pages for your IDP. It can be little widgets, little cards. It can be anything. But then also there's a back-end side to it too, which is we kind of use it a lot as how do I explain this in a good way? We use back-end plugins a lot to be kind of like a view model-y layer, so that we're going to call out to, you know, let's say Kubernetes, for instance, and then mutate that data a little bit so that it looks good for a view. And then we use that API in front-end plugins to render cards or render tables. As is the tradition with the Node ecosystem, your install takes quite a while. We're just going to keep chatting here. I did run this.
Could be worse. It could be Node install, right?
Yes, I did run this earlier, and it took only a few minutes. So I was like, oh, I'll delete it, and then I'll do it again in the thing. And now it's taking a little bit too long. But it's okay.
There we go. All good.
So this has created a Backstage app. I can walk through a little bit of like what you get out of the box. So we get this packages folder, and these are the two packages that we can see here. They are the app that I was just talking about, which is the front end. And then we also have the back end too. We're going to be editing these packages later to add some plugins. But I want to just run yarn dev here, which is basically going to set up a dev server for us, and we can see what we get outside the box, out of the box. And I can talk through a little bit here. And I actually need to go into the directory that I've just created, which is into the Backstage repo, into the Backstage folder, and then run yarn dev.
See, I'm glad you did that, because as soon as I got the error, I'd be going, "Oh God, what is wrong?"
It's not a great start, is it? Okay. So this
is
started,
like I said, doing it live, right?
Yeah. This has started both the front end and the back end. I am going to, by magic now, switch over to what you get.
Woo!
OBS. So this is what you get out of the box. We install a few plugins, like commonly used plugins, from the get-go. But you're free to pick and choose what you want. You can remove them, add more, of course. You can build your own. But this is kind of what you get out of the box. So we have, this is called the software catalog, or this is the catalog plugin. And this is basically, the catalog of components that I was talking about earlier. So we preload it with some example data. We have this example website thing in here.
Component here is a Backstage term of art, right? That means something specific for Backstage.
Yes. So we have a big article around like how the ecosystem model works, or like the SEM model, software ecosystem model. So components are, the easiest way to describe them is they are like a service or a website. So they are like running bits of code, or like kind of the smallest atom, I would say. And then you have systems and domains. So a system is a collection of components. So trying to work out the best way to describe this, but if you were to have like a checkout system, oops, sorry, that's going to pop up. That's some work stuff. Get rid of that. If you were to have like a payment system, right? Okay, oh, there you go. I've just said it. It's a payment system. A payment system is composed of many different components underneath it, many different APIs for doing payments. And the domain that it might belong to is kind of one level up higher than that. And I'm struggling to think of a good example right now. But
maybe a tenant in a multi-tenant system or something like that.
Kind of like them. They're more like domain. Like where does payments fall under domains? It's more like billing, okay, or something like that. So you'd have like a domain of billing or something like that. We have got hundreds of domains inside Spotify.
Gotcha.
And yeah, they kind of fall down. There's a good documentation on the SCM model on backstage.io/docs too.
I think that when I set up the catalog for Faces, I think I modeled Faces itself as a system.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because it's multiple components underneath, right? You've got the front end, you've got the APIs, you've got, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So we have an example website component loaded in here. I'm going to go click into it just now and to show you kind of what we get by default. So this is something that we call the entity page. Entity pages are kind of important in Backstage, at least if you're using Backstage with a catalog. And the entity pages are super customizable, so you can render whatever you like on here. You'll see we've got some tabs for CI/CD, where you might have like builds for this component. Obviously, this is just straight out of the box. This component doesn't really exist anywhere. It's just kind of a fake one. We're going to put some components in there soon. You might have dependencies, things like that. How these components interact with other components, and then also documentation. If that was also set up to, you'd be able to see documentation about the component. Like I said, they're super customizable, so you can render whatever you like on here. And depending on what type of component they are, maybe you have websites, you can have services, you can have libraries. They're all types of component. You might want to render something different for each different type on here. So let's say a library, for instance, that doesn't get deployed anywhere. That might not have like a Kubernetes tab, for instance, but a service that's running or a website that's running, that might have a Kubernetes tab. So you can customize and configure that however you like. You also get things like the scaffolder. I'm not going to dive too much into this today. I would love to. This is like my little baby. But this is how we would create new components, for instance, in Backstage.
Yeah, I'd actually like to. I would like to add more about demoing the scaffolder as well, because
I can do a little demo of the scaffolder if we have time.
The scaffolder is something that I myself kind of only, with Ben's help, kind of only figured out what the point was very recently, and it's pretty cool.
It is cool. It is nice. Okay, so we know that we have the Faces demo running inside that cluster, right? Let's go and add catalog, or let's go and add some catalog files, I guess, that's going to help us populate this catalog with the things that's running inside the cluster.
Real things.
With real things, yeah. So I am going to head back to my editor here. I have included inside this demo repo this example catalog. So I'm just going to make the terminal a little smaller so we can actually step through this a little bit. So this is kind of what the YAML representation of a catalog entity looks like. So we recommend that people store this metadata alongside their code. So if you have, a service in GitHub or whatever VCS provider you got, we recommend that you all have a catalog info file that's stored alongside the code, and you treat it exactly like any other infrastructure as code kind of file. And it just contains the metadata around the service. So if we just dive down to the component here, this is something that would describe the Faces GUI. And what this means is it's a collection of metadata around the component. So we know it's called Faces GUI. It looks very similar to a Kubernetes manifest. We stole a lot of like the specification for Kubernetes manifest because they're very good at representing metadata and tying it to versions. They don't work if you apply them to Kubernetes, so don't do that. It's not a CRD, but they look very similar, so there's a lot of confusion around that. But we can see that they have a name, a description, a namespace. We kind of stole the namespace concept as well a little bit, and they also have annotations. So if we just ignore the annotations for a second, I'm just going to dive into the spec part. So we can see that this is a component. It's a website. It's in production. Lifecycle is production. You can also have it as experimental. It is owned by a guest user. Obviously, it can be owned by an actual real team, and it's part of the system, the Faces system. These annotations, we really use them they're a foreign key, basically. So what this is saying is this Faces GUI component, how do I find that component in Kubernetes, for instance? So this is like a label selector. We can see that we are associating this component with any resources in Kubernetes that have the label service equals Faces GUI, and also is in the Faces namespace. And this is similar for like this GitHub, for instance. We can see that we're associating this entity with GitHub. This is the project log. It's the organ and repo for this code. There's many different uses of annotations, but they are primarily used just to kind of be that foreign key where you can associate back from a particular service, like what is that in the catalog, and so on and so forth. There's some more components in here too. I'm going to skip over most of them because they're kind of mostly the same. And yeah, there's also API definitions. So APIs can also live in the catalog, open API specs. And you can say, for instance, a component provides this API, and you can see that in the UI. If I tell add this file first, and then we can dig around it in the UI and you can see it. Let's do that actually, first off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our Backstage project here. I'm going to go down to app config here, and app config, there's a lot of defaults in here, but what we're actually looking for is the locations part, which is this thing here. So I'm going to add a new location. So we can see this is the example data that we load in already. You can delete this if you like. You don't have to. I mean, if you're going to have a production like version of it, yes, please delete the example data. You don't want that polluting everything. But for now, if you want to leave it in, it's entirely to you. So we're going to add a new location in here. I'm going to do this as a URL. So you can choose to import them as files, or like if you're just testing, for instance, like this, or you can choose to give them a URL. And the URL is just like the link from GitHub. So I'm going to do it as a URL, and the target is going to be, target. I'm just going to grab the target real quick because I don't have it to hand, but it is my repo. Sorry, 1 second. It's just going to be this link. Here we go. So it's just github.com/benjdlambert/ the workshop repo, the blob, the tree, and then example catalog. And this is going to be fine, I think. We're just going to save this. So I'm going to head back to the browser now. And as if by magic, we have new stuff in the catalog. So we have some new components in here now. We've got color, face, Faces GUI, and smiley. So these are, the things that have got running inside Kubernetes. They're not wired up exactly yet because we still need to configure the Kubernetes plugin, but we're going to get onto that shortly. I'm just going to quickly dive through what I mean by some of the APIs parts as well. So we can see we've got a nice little graph here of all the relations and how everything fits together with each other inside the system. If I do provides API, Faces API. So this is, again, an entity page for the API. We can click into the definition here, and we can actually see like a nice open API spec for how the API works. So kind of good if you're an engineer looking at how do I integrate with this service. Like I can go, okay, yeah, I've got an open API spec there. Great. Let's have a little dive back to home again. So we've got all these components, and if I click into like the face service, for instance, you'll see there's a new Kubernetes tab that's popped up here. So this pops up because of that annotation is there. It knows that we can associate this somehow with Kubernetes. If I click into it, we have a problem. We need to go and configure Kubernetes.
Is it? I'm sorry. Is it specifically that it knows that Kubernetes label selector means you should tie this to the Kubernetes plugin? Is the
Yeah.
name of the annotation magic?
So the annotate, because of how the entity pages are set up, so you can choose to show and hide these labels these tabs whenever you like. There's a little switch case which basically checks, has a selector which is if Kubernetes available, right? And then we show this tab, and that is basically looking at those annotations to see if they are there for the presence of them. It doesn't do any async calls and like check to see if it's available yet. It's just gonna go, okay, this smells like a Kubernetes component. Let me go and render the Kubernetes tab. So we have an issue here that the Kubernetes backend is not fully installed. It's not configured. So let us go and configure that. So I also have some other files inside this demo repo here. One of them being deployment 1. So the deployment 1 part is what this is doing is basically just some standard Kubernetes manifest for setting up a namespace for Backstage, a cluster role binding, and a service account and a token. So the token we're going to use locally. We're not going to use the token in the cluster, but we're going to use the token locally so that we can communicate with the Kubernetes cluster or the API server. Now, in production, you can do all sorts of ways to authenticate. You can use, depending on your cloud provider and depending on how you're using, we have providers for GCP, and to actually use sign in through Google to do that. You can use that authentication method, or there's plenty of other ones, but for the purpose of this demo, we're just going to use a service account token because it's the quickest and easiest to set up, and I'm pretty sure it's more interesting to watch me go through this rather than set up a GitHub app and a Google account to authenticate with things. So
I'm not gonna lie, as much as I love watching your work, that might be a bit of a bridge too far.
Yeah, I think it's going to be easy if we just skip a few steps. So I'm just going to make sure I'm on this correct cluster here, which I think is this one, because I don't want to apply this somewhere else. Yeah. Just apply our deployment 1 from the root. And hopefully this is going to go and, yes, create some resources for us. What I'm mostly interested in here is the secret. So I'm just going to grab, let's set this to Backstage so I can see how the secret's coming along. Yes, it's there. Okay, that's great. So
there's a secret there.
There is a secret there. I'm just going to quickly grab another command also. In fact, it is actually in this README. So what we need to do is configure the Kubernetes app config so that it looks like this in our app config file. You'll see that we need a server URL, and we also need a service account token. So the server URL I can do by grabbing this JSON path thing that Flynn kindly sent me earlier, which means I don't have to do it in 2 commands, which is great. So this, that was supposed to give me the URL. I think it will do it. It's just very quickly disappearing. I'm just going to do that and paste into PB copy so I can grab it.
Oh, too right. It's it's not doing a new line at the end.
No, that's my editor. It's fine. Oh, my terminal. I'm just going to jump back into app config now, and we can add this config into Kubernetes. So what I will do is I'll just grab this section from the docs and pop that in there. Oops. So we need the server URL, which I'll run that command again, so I can paste that in there. Nice. And then I also need the service account token. So this is in brackets, or because it's an environmental token or environment variable. So I am going to quit my current running terminal because we need to restart that. And I am going to grab the token, which there's another command for that in the docs too, just under this bit here, Backstage service account token. We're just basically what this is going to do is just go and grab the raw token from the cluster and export it as a Backstage service account token variable. So I'm going to do that here. And then I should be able to, well, hopefully, this should actually work with the Kubernetes part now. So let's just start this again. I'm gonna, I need to go into the Backstage folder again, sorry. Into the Backstage folder, click on Yawn Dev, and let's go to the browser and let's see if this is gonna work. Let's hope. Now we do the awkward waiting while everything compiles. Okay.
There we go.
Things back. Let's go to Faces. And let's hit Kubernetes. Oh, my God, it works. Yes, we're in.
Woo!
So you can see this is the workshop cluster. This in the config just here. Wait, sorry, I'll go back to the real quick. It's using the name here. You can call this whatever you like. But you can see that we have a cluster. I can click down here. I can see that there is one pod running for the service. It's this pod in particular, the 2 containers running. I can click in here a little bit, get some more information. I can see that Linkerd proxy is running. I can see that there's no readiness probe set for the Faces workload.
All right, I'll go fix that.
You can also view the logs. Now, the service account doesn't have access to read the logs. I was actually expecting an error here, but it didn't show. But the service account that I've added doesn't have read access to the logs.
But we could add it just easily enough, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the error might have been at the top, actually. I think it's because I've squished the screen a little bit here. But this is good. So now we can see stuff in Kubernetes. Yeah. We can see our deployments are running. It's well in Kubernetes. But we've now got some more stuff to install, because we can obviously use the Linkerd plugin too. So the Linkerd plugin is going to do things. Yes, it's going to tell us when components are not meshed, and they should be. It's going to give us a little runtime graph of like the upstream and downstream services for a given component. And it's also going to give us some information around the upstream and downstream services, what their requests per second are, and if they are on the mutual TLS, MTLS. Yeah, let's go and set it up. So that's the next part. So switching back to the editor a little bit here. I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller so that we can actually see some stuff on the screen. So yeah, we want to install some plugins. Now, those packages I mentioned earlier, app and backend, there's 2 parts of this plugin. So the front end is going to render those cards. We're going to pick and choose where we want those cards to go inside the entity page. We're going to add a new tab for Linkerd. But we also need to install the backend plugin. Now, the backend plugin is going to basically use the existing Kubernetes plugin to make requests to the Kubernetes API and therefore Linkerd and also Linkerd Viz. And then it's going to basically do similar to what Linkerd Viz does, grab some data out of there, give us some nice stats for our given component, and then give that to the front end.
So, and tell us, Ben, who wrote this remarkable Linkerd plugin?
I did. I used to use Linkerd back at my old company and kind of liked it from the big get-go. So I've,
We shall expect you to bring it back into the fold at Spotify then.
Yes, yeah, I know. I'm working on it. So let's pop over to our app package. So like I said, this is the front end. Now, if I just, what I want to do here is open up the source. And we can see if I go to the top level. So this is kind of how the app is wired up. So this is like a React app. And you'll see here, these are like the kind of plugins that are kind of installed today, or like the top level plugins, I guess. So you can see that we've got like the catalog plugin, we've got the docs plugin installed. We've also got the scaffolder installed here. We've got the API docs plugin. We've got a catalog import and so on and so forth. So this is stuff that you get out of the box. You can tweak this to our house content. You can get rid of it. You don't have to have all of these plugins. You can get rid of and choose what you want. It's super flexible like that. This sort of like modifying of all this source code, this is kind of what we're working on right now to make this a little bit easier, so that there is very little configuration to do in code. It's all going to be configured in YAML, our favorite language. So we're going to be leaning on that a lot more to basically
talk about damned with faint praise.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, I'm very much looking forward to seeing how that looks.
Yes, it's going to be much nicer. We are kind of rolling this out internally at Spotify at the minute, so yeah, good things are coming. We are going to battle test it internally for a bit and see what happens there. So under the components folder, we have a catalog. So you see here, this is a root for the entities. So if I just pop back to the browser, you'll see, I don't know if you can make this out in the address bar here, but it's catalog /faces /component /face. And that's basically /catalog. Oops. That's this part here, /catalog /namespace /kind/name. And it renders the entity page with this little thing in the middle here. Now, this little thing is what configures these views that you see for each entity. So this is a lot of like kind of switch case commands and kind of basically working out what we should render and where we shouldn't. Like I said, this is going to get better over time, but it's it's kind of composed in JSX at the minute and React. So we can see if I go to like the service entity page, for instance, now you're starting to see the tabs, right? So now you can see there's an overview tab, there's a CICD tab, there's a Kubernetes tab. This is the little predicate check I was talking about. If Kubernetes is available, and then we render the Kubernetes content. We have a tab for the API, and so on and so forth. But what we want to do is add in the Linkerd things. So I'm going to bring back the terminal again. We're just going to go over here. I'm going to go into the app package first. So we're going to install front end first. And we're going to do yarn add at backstage community /plugin Linkerd. If I could spell Linkerd, sorry, there we go. And then this is going to go and grab the Linkerd package. It's going to go and install it. And we're going to have it in the app. Now, the package is installed, but we need to use it. So this is kind of where the new system like stops, because now it's just installed and now it works and everything. You don't need to configure it unless, if you want the defaults, for instance. But we have to do a little bit of work here to go and add the plugin. So
until you'll go ahead and roll out the shiny new stuff, right?
The shiny new stuff, yeah. I was in two minds to whether to show that in this demo or not, but I didn't want to lie and make it look.
We appreciate that, yeah.
Well, I thought we'd do it properly, and we can do it what it does looks like today. So we're gonna.
Well, we can certainly come back to this too when we've got sure. After the new stuff is out. That'll be fun.
It'll be a very quick demo then. So we're gonna import from our Backstage community. Oops, plugin Linkerd. Yes, nice. So we are gonna see what we have to import here. So we've got the dependencies card, the edges table, and is meshed banner. So I'm going to grab the Linkerd dependencies card. I'm going to grab all of these things. And then we're going to use them and put them in the right places. So this takes kind of a little bit of knowledge around Backstage and kind of JSX and React-y, React experience to kind of get set up and working. We have this entity warning content here. So this is a component that renders at the top. So I want to add the is meshed banner to the top of this. So I'm going to copy and paste this switch statement here because this seems similar to what we want. We know that it only wants to render if is Kubernetes available, because we can just do it on the same check. Like if this looks like it should be in Kubernetes, then it should be meshed. If it's not meshed, then we need to tell people about it. And we're going to replace this with is meshed banner. Nice. If I just quickly go back to the browser and then head back here, it's going to say that it's not meshed. Now, I'm going to let into a little secret. That's because we've not configured the backend yet. It's a little bit of a red herring, but we can see that it's starting to render and we're starting to build up this page now. Now, let's say I want a Linkerd tab, right? And we're going to also show that when Kubernetes is available. So I'm going to go down to our service entity page. I'm going to copy and paste this Kubernetes one because this looks good. And
Makes sense.
Yep. I'm going to call this Linkerd. And oops. Sorry, there we go. I really can't type after 6 o'clock my time, apparently. And then we need to render something in here. So this is comprised of 2 cards. Now, let's just render these 2 cards side by side for now. Linkerd dependencies card, and let's do the edges table first. And we can see what they look like. They're not going to look pretty at first. We're going to make it look pretty. The edges table, there we go. And this needs to be in a root element, which is this. So if I click save now, and then if I go back to the browser, and now we have a link.
Those lines that are just the angle brackets or angles bracket slash, those are the most confusing things that you've done so far to me.
They're a fragment in React. So you can only render one element inside a root. Like those,
gotcha.
They're going to go away in a second, but it's a React thing. We can go to the Linkerd tab now, and look, we've got 2 big things here. They're huge at the minute. We obviously want to make these a little bit nicer, but we can see that the cards are rendering. Again, it's saying that it's not tagged or it's not injected, but it's just because we haven't configured the backend yet, which we're going to do. So let's make this a little prettier, actually, before we move on. I am going to wrap this in a grid with a container. And we're going to say that this is an item. And when it's on the small screen, it should be 5 columns wide. Let's do that. This is just going to align them to be in a grid and basically look a little prettier than 2 big cards because we like pretty. And then if I do item X7, thank you, Copilot. Got that in a grid there. There we go.
Clearly the grid believes that it's 12 columns wide.
It is. Yes. I did experiment with like what looked good. This looks okay. I think so. We go with it.
You've just summarized exactly the way in which everybody does React development, right?
Yes.
Let me play 5 and 7. That looks good. Yeah.
It looks good. We don't have a design,
and it does look quite a bit better. Yeah.
It looks good. So now we've got 2 little tables. Now we need to go and get some data, right? Because we need to populate this thing. We want to see what it looks like. We want to see what Linkerd stuff looks like. So the
interesting thing about this, of course, is that those of you following along at home, if you want to have dependencies and then the edges, you can do that. Or you can go and make it a 50-50 split, or you can do what you like, which is kind of cool. Although it is, it does require a certain amount of tinkering with React, as we've seen.
Yeah, it does. It does. So let's head back to the backend and let's configure the Linkerd backend. So let's pop back to the editor so you can all see the editor. Yeah, there we go. I'm getting the hang of this OBS thing. It's good. Let's pop over to the backend.
OBS is great.
OBS.
It gets even greater when you have little hardware buttons that you can use to switch scenes. Like
I need a little launch pad or something like that. Boop.
Yep.
So we're in the backend folder now, which is in packages backend. I want to add the backend plugin for Linkerd. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to do yarn add again, backstage community / plugin Linkerd backend. Very similar to the first one, apart from it's got backend prefix on the end, and that's kind of the distinction between the 2.
Well, the other bit is that you had to be in the backend directory instead of the app directory. Right?
Yes, you can. There is another command that you can run, which is like yarn --cwd, and then give it package backend, or you can
Same difference.
Yeah, or there's another one which you can do, which is giving it the workspace name. So you can do yarn workspace, and then I think it's like example backend it's called, but that's also not very intuitive. Really, backend is coming from. But it's the
CDing actually seems
much easier.
Seems the most simple to follow anyway.
Yes. So we've been through the front end. The front end is a big React app for us to configure. The back end is a little bit different. So it used to be in a very similar state where we had a lot of like non-frameworky stuff. Like we basically spent a lot of time moving or making things a lot easier to set up in back-end world. And now we're copying a lot of those learnings now to take to the front end. So that's why I said earlier that it's going to get a lot more simple. It is definitely going to get a lot more simple. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to install a back-end plugin now with that we just installed compared to kind of the front-end part. So we're going to go into source backend. So you see it just has one file. And it is just kind of just import statements of just importing the package and adding it to the backend. Now, we could even go a step further than this and remove all this and just detect the packages. There's a special module you can turn on which will just automatically detect any package that's installed to the backend and add it. But you don't get that out of the box just yet. We're still testing. But you can see this just adds a lot of the backend plugins that we've got out of the box, like the catalog backend plugin, scaffolder parts, little modules in here. And they're just all listed in just like one very simple line of code instead. It used to be that it was very similar to the other front end setup that was kind of a lot more code needed. We're kind of happy that we've kind of got to this one line install for plugins now, which is kind of really nice, and just rely on, config instead. And that's definitely something we're taking forward in the learning for the front end install for sure.
That'll be really nice.
Yeah, let's go and add the Linkerd plugin. So I'm going to do backend add import at backstage plugin plugin Linkerd. No, backstage community Linkerd backend. There we go. This is squiggly. I think this is squiggly because this is just my editor not being very dynamic today. Let's have a look. Restart TS server. I think this is just going to be fine.
It didn't need the alpha on the end of it?
I don't think it does. Let's give it a go. This is very interesting. Why have I never seen this before?
The thing that's so funny about this is that, I've been in exactly this situation where you look at it and go, I don't know, is this my editor being goofy or is this actually something wrong?
This must be. But it's very interesting. I'm going to ignore it for a second and hope that it fixes itself. Let's go over here to the backend. So the backend is saying model not found. That's interesting.
Well, that's no fun.
Backstage community plugin Linkerd backend. Aha. Sorry. It was Copilot trying to be helpful and giving me the wrong package name, I think. Oh, look, it works.
Thank you, Copilot. That's
yeah. So it's Backstage community plugin Linkerd backend. There we go. And now I'm gonna go to the root again and run yarn dev one more time. And I'm just gonna pop over quickly to the browser. Now, I think we're about to run into a little issue with the Viz deployment. I think we need to go and edit the Viz deployment for this example.
I think you're right.
Yes.
It's almost like we've done this in rehearsal. Yes.
I've done this in rehearsal. So I am going to do that now, actually. I'll just do that later. So a little bit of history. So we didn't, when I built the plugin originally, we didn't actually need this because there was a requirement that you had to run kubectl proxy and it just hit the proxy instead. But because we're using the Kubernetes plugin in the backend, it's making requests to Linkerd on behalf of, well, it's making requests using its proxy instead of like calling the kubectl proxy. So there's a little bit of I think it's a security thing, and I agree with it. It should be there, and you should edit it if you're going to use local development. But because we want to connect to Linkerd, actually running Linkerd Viz in the cloud, we need to just edit a little config in the Viz deployment that's going to relax a little security rule, which means that you to hit in the actual Linkerd Viz API.
If you're familiar with Linkerd Viz, you can go ahead and start doing the editing. If you're familiar with Linkerd Viz, the GUI for Linkerd Viz, it's the Linkerd Viz dashboard, actually has a requirement that you must access it as localhost out of the box, because the assumption is that you're going to be running Linkerd Viz dashboard, or you're going to be running kubectl port forward or something like that, and that's kind of the only outright access control built into the Viz dashboard. But that gets in the way. It's Linkerd-viz.
Yeah, I thought that. Oh, it's in the Linkerd Viz namespace. That's why.
Yeah.
Sorry. Viz.
And the problem is that bit of security gets in the way when you try to access it from Backstage.
Yeah.
Now, as we move on with this, we shall shift over to running Backstage in the cluster instead of running it with yarn dev, and then this will, we hope, get better.
Yeah. And also, I want to put there's also the ability for a user who's developing Backstage locally to actually hit the running Backstage API or the Linkerd plugin in the cloud, which won't have this issue because it's running in the cluster. It's just because we're running the Linkerd backend plugin locally here that it expects a local cluster. But for the purpose of this demo, we're just going to be hitting the one that's shared so we can actually see things happening a little bit easier. So with that has been edited now. I'm going to head back to the browser, and I'm going to hope that when I click on this thing, it's going to work. So I'm just going to quickly refresh. We're going to go to the Faces service, and look, there is no error message. This is great. So we're going to go to the Kubernetes thing. We see this is all still running, which is good. And we're going to head over to Linkerd tab, and now we're hopefully going to get some information. And we do. Look,
excellent.
Linkerd edges and runtime dependencies running locally. Which is great.
We can just see at a glance that everything is using MTLS, which is lovely. And you get to see the architecture of the Faces application over there in the runtime dependencies, just without having to go through and do a bunch of research, which is even more great.
Which is nice. Yeah, it would be really nice if we can, I mean, there is a lot of open issues for this plugin that both me and Flynn have created. So if anybody wants to help out and build, please do. But it would be great to add some, especially for metadata, being able to dynamically generate all dependencies, the entire graph of I know in some organizations that's going to be huge, but it would be really nice.
But still, see
what dependencies you think you should have and what you actually have would be very interesting for any organization or any engineering team, I would say. I mean, for us and the stuff that we work on at Spotify, it would be excuse me, who are you and why are you calling my service? Why am I now part of this? Yeah, it's interesting for sure.
Yeah. And that has very so one of the things that we came up with that we shipped just recently with Linkerd 2.16 is this policy audit mode where you can ask Linkerd to generate a bunch of authorization policies based on your traffic. And that sort of thing dovetails very nicely with being able to generate the call graph, see what's there and what might not should be there.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we now have Linkerd running locally. Let's go and try and deploy this to the cluster. So we create a namespace for the deployment to go into. As we mentioned earlier, Backstage is very much a framework, and it's you have to build a lot of stuff yourself, including a Docker container, which means that all this code that we've got locally, we're going to build all this, put it in a Docker container, and then be able to deploy that into the cluster. And it's going to, hopefully do the same things we're doing locally. It's just that then Flynn can also see it.
Yeah.
So let's go and do that. I am going to head back to the editor. So first off, we want to...
Oh, you know what? Let me interrupt for one moment. Since we were talking while you were doing the edit of the web deployment, the change that Ben actually made to the web deployment, the Linkerd Viz web deployment, really, I can speak English. In there is an enforced host regex pattern, and Ben just deleted that. Normally, that's set up to enforce that you must be connecting either as localhost or 127.0.1 or things like that. And if you just delete it, then you can connect from anywhere. This is obviously not ideal from a security point of view. Right now, we are relying on the fact that Viz is using a cluster IP and not a load balancer IP to protect it from evildoers out on the internet, like everyone watching, or me, or but yeah, so this should get better, as we mentioned, once we have this running in the cluster instead of on Ben's laptop.
Yes, would not recommend doing that. Yeah, I think we can actually probably put it back after the thing's deployed, and it should actually all work. I think.
Yeah, that'll be a fun thing to try.
Okay, let's try and create a Docker container. So first off, our config is split up into multiple different tiers. So you can see we've got config local, which is just anything I'm going to be working on locally. That's not committed to Git. We've got config production, which is special config, which is going to get merged with the existing config that we've been editing already in app config. So I'm going to head over to the production config. Now, for the purpose of this demo, we would normally configure this with like a Postgres database in production rather than the in-memory SQLite that it's using. But we can just get away with SQLite for now rather than trying to spin up a Postgres cluster. You would also probably want to set up an auth provider that would actually let you sign into Backstage if this was public, rather than using guest auth, which is what we do locally to make it easier. But for the purpose of this demo, we're not going to do that. We're just going to use some of the guest authentication stuff. We're going to use SQLite. Again, these are not things I would recommend in real life. Like, please go and read docs. There is a lot more stuff about deploying it in production. But I think for us to get this set up and actually working, it's going to be good. So I'm going to, first off, just delete most of this config because it's kind of duplicated from what we've got already. So I'm just going to delete all of that. I need to just grab some stuff out of the README because I added some of the YAML and I don't want to get this wrong. So save some time. So I'm going to, there's quite a lot of documentation here. So if you do get stuck at any point, there is a lot of details in the README and a guide for you to go and help set it up. So we're going to copy this little flag here.
I still love that dangerously allow outside development name.
It is what it is.
Brilliant.
It does what it does. Yeah. So we purposefully disallow guest authentication outside development, which is for security. Again, we're going to just turn that off for now so that we can actually deploy and actually log in without having to set up, auth providers and setting this up to GitHub organization, for instance, that you might do. Like you can set up Backstage to ingest users from LDAP, for instance, and only let you to log in with LDAP users. You can set up Backstage to sign in with GitHub, GHE, whatever you like inside your organization, Okta, any kind of sign. That's all supported. We're just going to skip the setup of that because that normally takes a while. So yeah, we're going to disable or dangerously enable guest outside of development. And because we are not going to be running on HTTPS, we are going to be running HTTP in the cluster. We are just going to add this too. I think this should be enough. I think it should be good.
And if you don't say anything about databases or whatnot, then it just sticks with SQLite in memory. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. So it's going to take the app configured YAML. So you'll see we have here configured SQLite and it's in memory.
Right.
This config is just going to get merged with production. So production is just going to override these things really.
Excellent.
And go from there. So let's.
So as usual, don't try this at home, kids, or at least don't try this in production, kids.
Please set up authentication for Backstage. Please go and do it.
Yeah.
So let's go and actually build a container. So I have, first off, we need to build the entire repo. So first off, what we're going to do is run yarn build all. And this is going to, basically bundle the front end and bundle the back end all together in one, or altogether, it's going to bundle it together. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use that bundle and put that inside a Docker container for us to deploy. So this is basically collecting all the JavaScript and all the React and all the TypeScript, transpiling it into just raw JavaScript so that we can execute it in the browser and also in the backend in the Docker container. So that's built all of our packages. Now we need to go and build the Docker container. So I have a Docker.io hub repository registry thing set up. I might just need to work out what that was a second. Oh, wait, actually, it's 617, right? I think it's something.
Benjamin L617, I think.
Yeah. Okay, let's give this a go. I might just actually need to go and find out what the thing was called. 1 second, sorry. Did I have it in the README? Maybe I did. Yeah, no, I didn't. No, I did. Here we go. Look, nice.
Look at that.
So yes, I realized I've got some nice little script here to do the image name and the version in. So I'm gonna copy this.
The critical bits here, if you are following along at home, are first off that you will not be able to push to Benjamin's Docker control. You'll have to use your own.
That is true.
And the other bit there is that you see Docker buildx build -- platform equals Linux AMD 64. That is there because Ben is doing this on a Macintosh, but the CVO cluster we're using is an x86 cluster. And the first time we did this, we built it as an AArch64 Docker image, and it decided that it was not willing to run in our cluster. We were both very confused for a few minutes.
It did not like that, and then it also took me quite a while to work out how to actually build this properly, because I think like Rosetta and stuff gets in the way. It's just really it was a nightmare. But anyway, we got it working eventually. So I'm gonna basically create my image name as a variable that we're going to use for also the Docker apply. The Kubernetes kubectl apply later.
Yeah.
But I'm also just going to use it for building this Docker file too. I've already run the yarn build, so I'm going to skip that because we don't need that. I'm just going to save us a bit of time here. So yeah, we're going to build the Docker file with everything that we've got locally, which is going to include the front end and the back end. It all gets packed into one single container, and it runs on one port. So when you navigate to port 7007, it is by default. What that's actually going to do is two things. It's going to serve the backend plugins under like a /API route, and it's also going to serve the React app under like /. So the built static assets will get served by the backend, all default for you, nice and easy, which is really good. That's really cool. This also, we're now hitting a yarn install, so this could take some time. So I guess, is there any questions or anything? Do we?
I haven't not been seeing questions in the Slack channel so far, so I believe that obviously we've either been completely losing everybody or we've been doing a brilliant job, which is to say you've been doing a brilliant job, one of the two. Yeah. I will say, for those of you who are watching along and also, using macOS as your desktop thing, I have actually personally taken to using OrbStack instead of Docker for Mac because it makes some of this a bit simpler. As Ben points out, figuring out how to turn on Rosetta for Docker turns out to be pretty critical if you're trying to do cross-compiling stuff.
Yes, it was a little tricky to get sorted. Working because I basically ended up trying to follow some online documentation, which didn't really help. And then somebody recommended, just turn off the Rosetta flag in Docker settings. I was like, okay, do that. And then it would let me build it because it just, otherwise it would complain. I don't understand. Yeah. But yes, it is what it is. But yeah, we're going to build this Docker file. We're going to deploy using the deploy2.yaml that's in the Link workshop repo. And that's going to allow us to deploy this built container that is hopefully going to get pushed to my registry after this command is done, once yarn is finished doing with its stuff and bundling everything up. I can say that most of this is cached, like the Docker build is cached. So unless you change the dependencies, it's not going to do yarn install again, which is good.
Yeah. There we go.
Okay, so this is done. Now we are going to go and try and do a little Docker push now.
I did get one comment on Slack from somebody who was saying that they didn't believe you, that it was your first time using VS Code. And I'm quite confident it's not your first time using VS Code, but it is your first time using OBS.
Yes. Yeah, I have used VS Code before. VS Code is my go-to editor. It's very nice. I used to use Sublime for a long time.
Likewise.
Yeah, and then switched to VS Code. Tried to find
I tend to switch a lot between Emacs and Sublime and VS Code, depending on what I'm doing. But it's really funny because VS Code is the one with the best integration with Copilot. And when I'm working on stuff that's completely open source, I'm not going to lie, Copilot can be very handy at times.
It is very good. I do like Copilot a lot. It is very confidently incorrect at the same time sometimes.
Well, I mean, that's the problem with any of this AI stuff right now is that it will be so confidently completely wrong.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah. I mean, we've used
but
it
as a
for-
domain expert,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, if I'm using it to do stuff where I know what's right and what's wrong, oh man, does it save me a bunch of typing.
For sure. Okay, we are retrying. I think we're
Retrying. What?
There
There
we
we
go. Eventual consistency. There we go. It works. So hopefully, yes.
There
Now
we
we
go.
have. I'm going to
Excellent.
put version 2. We're on. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to. So if I just go to the deployment 2 YAML here, I have this image name tag in the deployment. Now this is just a standard deployment that we're going to deploy to Kubernetes, right? It's just the actual deployment. You have the image. We give it the service account, which is the service account we're going to use. We actually don't even need to provide. So if you'll see in this config here, we actually don't even need to set up this account token anymore. I'm not sure if this is going to complain that we haven't actually set the environment variable or not, but we'll give it a go because otherwise I need to just read. But we don't actually need to provide the service account token because it's just going to use the service account in Kubernetes to communicate with the Kube API and communicate with Linkerd and stuff. So I'm just going to go and try and roll out this deployment now. So let's just let's make this a bit bigger so we can actually see. Let's do cat deployment. Oh, sorry, where is it? Back. Deployment 2.yaml, and I'm going to just cat that into env subst because we've got this set as a environment variable, right? There we go. Let's just see if this worked.
Looks like it.
There we go. And then we're just gonna, security pipe that into kubeCon and let that apply.
And you're just.
Oh, what? Sorry, I didn't write apply.
Oh well, yeah, that might do it.
Yes.
That's just the deployment and the service that you've done, and your service was a load balancer, right?
It is a load balancer. So this is also another thing that we might need to do. I'm hoping we're going to get away with it, but we might have to grab the public or like the IP that this is going to be running on, or like the public DNS that this is going to be running on. We also might need to update the production config to say that we are running at these, like this is the base for where this container is going to live.
So what we're doing right now is, hey, we have an external IP now. If you do kubectl get service -n backstage.
kubectl get.
This is why we're doing this on a shared cluster, so I can run this as well.
Yes.
And there we go. We've got that running.
And does this work if you navigate to it?
I don't know. Let's find out.
Let's go. All right, let's go over here.
Hey, take a look at that.
Oh my God, it does. Look, log in as guest user.
And now it says fails to sign in as a guest using the auth backend when I click on it. What's up with that?
This is because we need to set up the base URLs and stuff, I think.
Oh.
But now we have the base URL, I can redo that. So we can just do that by doing backend base URL is going to be HTTP.
We can't see what you're typing right now.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. This my OBS skills are going downhill as we speak. Base URL. We're just going to configure this. So the reason that we need to do this, one is for kind of
HTTPS or HTTP?
HTTP. Sorry. There we go. Oh, we already have a backend part. I'm just going to grab that and put that in there then. Okay, nice. So the reason we do this, it needs to be built into the static like JavaScript that gets run in the client, because it needs to know where to communicate with the Backstage backend. You might not deploy these things together, you see. You might deploy them separately. You might have the front end just being some static bucket somewhere and just served by CloudFront or whatever. Some other,
got it. Okay.
So you need to tell it where the backend is going to live, because the backends can also live wherever. They can be deployed into multiple different clusters. They could be multiple split versions of deployments. Like you might have some plugins that run in one deployment. So like internally, for instance. Yeah.
In the meantime, we should probably be redoing that Docker build right now, right?
Yes, we should. So
Or redoing, do we need to redo the yarn build or just the Docker build?
Yes. So we just need to do yarn build all again. Yeah. While this is building, I'll talk about that. So internally at Spotify, you'll see it in this repo, everything's deployed together in one mono repo, right? Internally at Spotify, we actually split out the deployments of like the software catalog, the scaffolder, like they're separate services that get deployed in isolation. They have their own separate database, whereas you can deploy things together or separately, however you like, really. Let's kick off the Docker build again quickly. We also need to change the
Yeah, I was going to say you might need to change that version.
Export image name. Where were you? Is it in here? Here we go.
There we go.
I'm just gonna go and I really want to just click and edit, but I can't do that. 201. Let's go. Okay, this should be a little bit quicker this time because we don't. Oh, there we go. Look at that.
Yeah. Well, don't forget the Docker push.
Yes, I could have also just done -- push as well. Docker push.
Yeah. Huh. I'm surprised there's 2 layers that changed from that. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be that. I guess I shouldn't be that surprised, really. But
yeah. Okay. Okie. Let's go. This hopefully should work. So the reason you get an error, right, as it is today, is because localhost 7007 is baked into the bundle because it's in the app config. So it tries to hit localhost 7007 locally, which is why it doesn't work. That is pushed. So let's go and reapply this again with cat and subs apply. It's configured the deployment. It should be doing something now.
It is creating a container. The new one is running. The old one is now terminated.
Let's head back to the browser. This is the old one I haven't refreshed yet. We're going to do it.
Hey, look at that. Works for me.
Yes, it works. And does Linkerd stuff work? Yeah, we're missing the guest entities. That's because they're excluded. But it's okay.
Well, let's try this then, just to see, shall we? If I flip over to my screen share, let's see what works when I do it on my system. So if I click on this thing, guest entities don't exist. But if I come over here to Kubernetes, it finds me a cluster. I can go through, I can look at this, and somewhere in here I can probably click and get it to show me that I don't have it. Yeah.
Pod ID. There you go.
There we go. And now I get my embarrassing no readiness probe thing again. Excellent. If I look at Linkerd, this is working. This is amazing. And I'd like to point out again that I'm doing this from, across the Atlantic from Ben, but we're still talking to the same cluster and it's running in there, so it works. There's one other thing that I want to try, which is right now we don't have Backstage in Linkerd. So
no, we don't.
Shall we live dangerously and see what happens?
I can. So one thing we need is just like you can for sure add the decoration to the namespace. But what would be kind of cool is if I could actually create a component called Backstage in.
Oh, that would be very cool.
I have an idea.
Shall I keep on with this then?
Yeah, you can do that. I'm going to go ahead and just create a sample YAML file that we can ingest.
Just for those of you watching along at home, it's worth noting that this is entirely off the reservation in terms of any demo stuff that we've tried before. So
this is untested ground now.
Completely untested ground. So I had to reload my GUI here, but hey, it's working. This is great. And if I come back over to my web browser, or to my shell window here rather, and I get the pods in the Backstage namespace, we now see 2 of 2 running containers, which is to say we now have Backstage is meshed while Ben is getting the
frantically trying to work out how to
While
grab
Ben
it.
is
Oh, no,
frantically getting the component going, I'm going to come over. Let's take a look at Linkerd Viz, where we see, look, Backstage shows 1 of 1 mesh deployments. That's pretty cool. So,
I have
and
a little.
also nice is there.
So I'm just gonna go and add this Backstage. You can do this actually. It's gonna be fun if this works. So you can go to Backstage if you.
Sorry, I can.
Sorry, I'm just pushing this quickly. If you go to the Linkerd workshop demo, my link.
Okay.
My GitHub link. Sorry. Oh, you can just do a pull, right? Yeah, that's good. Because I was going to say you can just import it via URL in the Backstage, in the running instance.
So what do you?
So if you go back to the Chrome, sorry. Oh yeah, and then if you go to /catalog-import and yeah, -import. Sorry, not slash.
Oh, right.
Yeah, remove all the other stuff that just got.
Like
there
that.
We go. Yep. And then you can register an existing URL. So this is going to be the URL from my repo that I've just pushed up there, which is, I can grab you the URL real quick.
Yeah.
Do you want me to send it to you?
Yeah, just paste it over onto Slack.
Yeah. 1 second.
Here you have it, folks. Live collaborative development transatlantically.
I really hope that this works.
Well, yeah, so do I.
I think it's going to be fun. Oh,
I mean, you know, the absolute worst bit is that we find that we have to do it a different way, right?
I feel this is going to work. It's going to say that john@example.com is not a user, but that's okay.
Yeah, who cares?
You can add that link. I just sent it to us.
Right. So Ben just slacked me this link.
Yeah.
Which is, you'll note, github.com, his user ID, the Backstage Linkerd workshop repo, and then we're going to look at Backstage.yaml on main. If I hit return, it will say, hey, we're going to add an entity called Backstage.
Yep.
Import.
And then you can click on view component. There we go.
Oh, looks like it's not currently meshed with Linkerd.
Maybe I got this wrong. Oh. Because it's is it service Backstage is the label selector. I was trying to find out what we deployed the deployments as. Maybe I got this wrong. Labels, service Backstage. Well, maybe the.
Well, let's find out.
Maybe I got the annotations wrong.
Well, you should at least be able to do Linkerd proxy deployment Backstage.
Service Backstage.
Oh, yeah, you do have service Backstage.
Why is it not working? This should definitely work. Let me.
Oh, wait, never mind. I got it.
Yeah, because that's his faces there, but I updated it quickly in the catalog. If you just do a fetch again, I updated it to say Backstage as the namespace.
Oh, that could do it, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think that worked still. It's very strange.
So, but if I go back to catalog import, is that the...
so the catalog that'll be imported already, and it'll be refreshing in the background. You can go to the...
Oh, okay.
Go to Backstage. Go back to the Chrome window, and let's have a look at the... So it's there, Backstage, yeah. Looks like it's not meshed. If you click into Kubernetes, does it pick up that it's actually deployed to the cluster? Yeah, it does. So why does it say it's not meshed? Maybe that's a bug in my Linkerd plugin. I think it could be because it's picking up that it's existing in the cluster. I think it's just
and it's picking up that it's got, you know, both proxies and all that. So, well, yeah, I think maybe we just found a bug in the plugin. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's a bug in the plugin. Can you just click on the tab? I just want to see what happens in the tab. Does it?
I'm sorry. Click on what?
Click on the Linkerd tab. Does it actually do the same thing, or does it?
There is no Linkerd tab.
Oh, why? Oh, because it's a website. Aha! I think I know what it is.
Excellent.
Let me just quickly push a.
So we shall cheat by going back to Ben's screen whilst he's fixing this.
It's okay. I fixed it already, I think.
Okay.
It's just the spec is a website. It should be a service for now, I think, at least. And then if you just click on the little refresh button there, go back to overview. If you overview, yeah, and then there's a little refresh button. Little next to the about card or the about. There's a little pen. Right. Yeah, you can click on that. Not the pen one. Sorry, the refresh. That's the one. Yeah, and that's going to reload the entity. And then if you click refresh, now.
You mean refresh the browser window?
Yeah, this should change into a service now. No, it has not. Well, this might be a little slower to update than expected.
Come on, you can do it.
I can cheat very quickly, and just because we're using SQLite, I can just cycle a pod, and it'll come back up with a clean database, and you can re-import it. And I think that should fix it. I'm really hoping now that this works. But if it doesn't, it's okay. I can go and fix the plugin. I think it's a bug in the plugin, to be honest, if this doesn't work. There we go. You should be able to try and sign back in again now. I'll just refresh. It's going to say internet found. That's okay. Let's go to the catalog import.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So catalog-import.
And now I need
you can paste in the URL.
Paste in the URL again.
Yeah. Now it's a service. It's still not meshed.
But it's still not meshed.
Yeah. Does the Linkerd tab work?
No. Yeah. All right.
Okay. Well, that's my part. I will fix that.
So this is how you know we're doing it live.
Yeah. That would have been so good if it worked. Oh.
It really would have been. Honestly, I'm just kind of pleased that meshing Backstage on the fly worked when we had never tried it before. So that was quite nice. So yeah, if there are any other questions, then now would be a wonderful time. I don't see any. We can give people a minute or so to come up with anything. In the meantime, thanks very much for walking us through all that, Ben.
Not a problem.
And doing all the heavy lifting on this demo anyway.
It went to plan, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
all good.
And I'm quite curious to see what's up with that particular. To see what you find when you look into that particular bug.
The other things work fine. It could mesh. It could. Other pods mesh fine. So I don't know. Maybe it's just something
really
I
nice.
got wrong. Configuration. Maybe we can have a look.
It's that if not Backstage somewhere in the code.
Yeah, maybe something like that for sure.
All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and call it then, since we're a touch over time anyway. Thanks again, Ben. Much appreciated. Actually, let me do this really quickly. So
fingers crossed for the demo.
Yeah. Links to getting started with the Backstage and to our demo repo one more time. I'll come back to this slide in a moment. Again, tell us how feedback matters. And that link also is here in the chat. I'm going to paste it just as a raw URL in these two places. And just in case the QR doesn't scan for people, which it might not, because I realize a bit of it's cut off at the bottom. We also have the Service Mesh 101 certification course for Linkerd. Absolutely go check that out. learn.buoyant.io and Buoyant Enterprise for Linkerd, which I think we were actually using today. Were we? Why, yes, we were using Buoyant Enterprise for Linkerd 2.16.1. It's really quite nice that we did all this without even knowing whether we were using the open source version or the enterprise version. Always fun when that works out that way. So, yeah. And other than that, many thanks. Appreciate everybody showing up and watching. And Ben, once again, thanks very much for driving everything.
Thank you. No problem.
We are skipping Service Mesh Academy for November since we will be off at KubeCon. At the time, we would normally do Service Mesh Academy. And since KubeCon will be eating everybody's brain for the next month or so, but we will see everybody back here on, I believe it's December 16th, where we're going to be talking about some new features in Linkerd. So thanks so much, everyone. We'll talk